Welcome to the Dr. Dad's podcast, where a naturopath and chiropractor come together each week to share lifestyle medicine, health advice, and inspiring interviews with some of the top experts in health and wellness, bringing you the latest in nutrition, exercise, ancient healing, toxins and detox, your microbiome, mindset, hormones, brain, and much more. Stay tuned. We're going to teach you how to experience growth daily.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Dr. Dad's podcast. David, it's been like a couple weeks, man. I've been missing you.
We're back. March was a busy month, man. Yeah. March and end of February was madness for both of us. But yes, it's good to see you, man. I missed you. I missed our talks every week, and I think our listeners are missing us too, man. They're like, "Hey, are you guys gonna post any more podcasts?" I was like, "Yeah, we just got some stuff going on. I'm gonna get back at it."
Yeah. Well, we launched our podcast too, or not our podcast. We launched our website as well, which is great.
So for our listeners, go check it out. It's pretty awesome. Nick did an amazing job. I'm going to give him the credit there. I had very little input. It was it was somewhat of a team effort, but Nick handled most of that. But yeah, go check out the website. We're going to add a few more things here in the next month or so for you guys to have links to on there for many of the things that we always talk to you about and preach and things that we use on a daily basis. Yeah, man, I'm excited, man.
Give them the link address, buddy.
Yeah, so it's www.thedrdads.podcast.com.
Yeah, I think it's just thedrdads.com.
Or the Dr. Dads. Yeah, I think either one will work, actually.
I think they both work, yeah.
Yeah, but check it out. Let us know what you think. Shoot us a message on there. There's a way to contact us. If you guys have any questions, anything you want us to talk about, potential guests to get on the show. Me and Nick get hit up all the time to get guests on. So we're always looking for interesting people and topics and themes. So any of that stuff would be great. But yeah, man, I'm ready to get back at it, man.
Yeah. So we're going to dive into all things related to muscle repair, muscle building, muscle recovery. And we're going to dive into some of our own experiences, just with, our collegiate sports and things that we did in our past, and then what we do to maintain, preserve, and with that mindset of longevity. So I thought we could maybe start with, so David played college football. I played college basketball. We played at pretty, I guess, elite levels. We obviously didn't get as far as we would have maybe liked to, but we were in these training circumstances which demanded a lot of our bodies, and we didn't know what we know now. So, but let's give a little, highlight maybe of what some people, whether they're in high school, college, or weekend warrior club teams and things like that. What did you do when you were going through some of the training, and that maybe you still do now, which I think would be interesting to see?
You hit it on the head when you said, "I wish I knew now what like back then," right? That's saying, when we were playing, I think I've talked to you about this, buddy, so clueless. And then you're going off the advice of many of these people, like your strength coaches and stuff, and they're doing the best with what they know, right? I'm not going to bad talk anybody there. But man, I've learned so many lessons from all the mistakes I've made of not being able to attain the goals I wanted, either with my building or the recovery, right? To where I'm at a place now in my late 30s from trials and tribulations, and honestly, of learning the best way to do it versus the ways I thought I was supposed to do it. So there's a lot of conventional wisdom around many of these things. And I think it comes from a lot of people in the gym that read different articles or they read different things. And so you kind of hear a lot of things that really, when you put them to the test, they don't work, to be honest with you. And it's bad advice. And you see this a lot. And I think that's why a lot of people actually struggle to sometimes get some of these goals that they want, right?
Yeah.
So to start, I think would be a good place to talk about, we can maybe talk about some myths as far as your approach of going into these things. And the first thing I kind of start with that I tell everybody when it comes to either building muscle and just getting gains in whatever direction that looks like. So whether you're a collegiate player, you're a dad like us, and you're just trying to stay in shape and fit, there's just some basic principles that will ring true for everybody, no matter where you're at. And one is, I tell all my people, stress plus rest equals growth. Now, why do I stress this? because everybody forgets the rest part.
Mm-hmm.
We have this idea that we think the more stress we put on our body, the more we exercise, the more times you get in the gym, the more intensity you can build, throughout the week in your workouts, you're going to have bigger gains. And the reality is that is 100% incorrect. And it took me till I was like in my mid-30s to figure that out, man. It really did. It took me till I was in my mid-30s.
Same boat. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad, right? Because like when you're younger, you want those gains, you want to be seeing those things, and when you're not getting them, it gets frustrating. I mean, I remember being in my 20s when I was playing ball at UTEP, and I was strong, but I wouldn't say I was physically fit, well-rounded fit with my body. I didn't have the best recovery. I didn't know what that was back then.
Flexibility probably wasn't there either.
Yeah, I had no mobility, there was a lot of holes you could have punched in my fitness level. But as far as building my body back then, it was simple as you train 5-6 days a week, you drink protein shakes. There was some creatine thrown in there from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about it, man. And then I just ate like a horse all the time.
Yeah.
When I was at UTEP, I think I weighed like 195 back then. I weighed like 165 now. But it's just interesting how plain it was. And yeah, I was big and thick, but it's kind of one of those things where you look swole big, is like we call it, because you're inflamed and you're puffy and you're not actually lean and ripped and seeing muscle, right? And I remember always thinking, like, how come I can't get that lean physique and look all ripped? And I look big and muscular, but I'm all puffy and swollen, right? So that's kind of my little tidbit. But the biggest thing I realized was, number one, was my diet played a huge role in that. The amount of sleep I was getting played a huge role in that, and the amount of rest. And those three things were not a huge thing for me back then.
Yeah. And why would they be? Like someone going to college, you're having fun, I remember my first year playing basketball, and we were eating food on res, and it was like, sure, I'll have French fries again today. I'll eat that trans fat. I'll snack all day. I'll do, it was sort of my first time away from my parents, and in the residence cafeteria, you could kind of just whatever you kind of felt like. If you felt like having French fries, you do it, or the extra potatoes, and there was no conscience back then. I think just the power of nutrition. Fast forward to where we are now. I imagine in college, I imagine in some of these other programs, probably more so in the U.S. than in Canada, because I think you guys just overall have more sophisticated, coaches and things like that are helping players. But I'm sure nutrition is much more of a big focus than it used to be. However, there's still gaps in that. And I love how you started this from that first myth of just understanding recovery. So before we jump into maybe the second myth around just eat as much as you can and crush the protein shakes, let's dive into just what does rest mean? Like, what is that space for repair, and how does that tie to sleep?
Well, the first thing I would start with is just the whole sleep piece, because I would say you got to get good sleep. If you're not sleeping, you're not repairing, you're not recovering. You can go weeks without getting adequate sleep and good quality sleep, and you're losing your gains right there. And that's something a lot of people need to work on. They don't have good sleep behaviors. They're not even on a good circadian rhythm, which you should be trying to achieve something like that. So, when you hit that sweet spot, I always tell everybody, when you're in that rhythm, you'll wake up at almost the same time every day, and you'll be falling asleep at the same time every day. I beat my alarm when I'm in my rhythm. But what's funny is if I ever start to sway away from my sleep habits, I stay up a little longer and watch a movie with Clarissa, or I eat something too late. This starts to really, it really messes up my sleep, man.
Yeah.
And then I'll lose an hour here or there. And then by the end of the week, I'm catching up. So there's got to be a little bit of discipline, man. So sleep's huge. So I would start there with anybody. If you're not sleeping well, you've got to get better sleep. Second to that is when you're looking at just recovery, there's days where you just take off and you don't work out that day. And then there's active recovery. So active recovery could be things like oh, I'm going to do a yoga flow today, or I'm going to go on a nice, low intensity jog and just kind of open up and get my heart rate up and, run for maybe 30 or 40 minutes. So there's things that we can do even when we're not putting tons of stress. It's just low to moderate stress on our body, but our body's still able to recover. And in all honesty, things like cardio on an active recovery day are great. They push lactic acid through the body. They get your circulation going. You're getting muscle contraction, get that lymphatic flow. There's all these things that's happening when you're just moving a little bit more on those days of rest, right?
Yeah.
And then, like I said earlier, it's good just to sometimes just have a day of rest.
Mm-hmm.
I have some clients, they'll get stagnant in the gym with their gains, and they're not seeing progress there. And I'll say, you know what? And I'll ask them how often they're working out, and I'll say, you know what? Just rest one more day of the week. And they just kind of look at me like, what? And I'm like, just take one more day off of the week and either do active recovery or don't work out. And then literally, man, within like 2 weeks, they're starting to get their gains again and things are coming back. And they look at me like, it's the recovery. It's not the stress. It's you were doing too much and your body can't keep up with those RPMs. Right. So yeah, man, that right there is, I think, a big mistake that a lot of people make.
Yeah. One of the guys that I reference a lot is Dr. Doug Mcguff. Have you ever followed any of his stuff?
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. He's basically he's a doctor that obviously focuses in on exercise physiology, but his whole thing is super slow training and really burning out that muscle. But the big thing is that he teaches is that, you truly got to tune into your body, because a lot of his philosophy, especially for those that don't have an active routine, they're just slowly getting back into it. He has something called the Big Five, which is like pull downs, press, squats, and there's two other things. Maybe it's deadlifts or something, but it says there's only the big five that you do when you go to the gym, go through super, super slow sets, and it really upregulates the activity of your super fast twitch muscle fibers. So you fatigue faster. You only need to spend 15 to 20 minutes in the gym. But his whole thing that he keeps harping on is recovery. Maybe, if you're just starting, you do that once a week. And that's your workout. Maybe then you're doing this more active recovery on those opposite days, which could be yoga or, a jog or whatever it is. And breaking through your gains, this kind of switching up your weight routine is huge as well. But the whole thing of like pushing on a daily basis just depletes, the adrenal system, the thyroid and everything else, the other stress systems in the body, the brain even. And so that your recovery, even at sleep time, is just not quite there. So, knowing where to sequence those weight days where you're really challenging your body with that stress, as you mentioned, is really powerful. And so I think that, people can check out some of his work as well on this topic of stress and rest.
Well, the other cool thing, sorry, but since you're on that topic, the whole like going through those movements really slow, that's great for muscle recruitment. You actually recruit more spindle cells when you do it that way, right?
Yeah.
And so you get more contraction of the entire muscle. So from a building standpoint, I love stuff like that. I will do things like that on and off with like air squats or lunges or just real simple dynamic movements just to see. And what you'll notice when you do these things is you'll start shaking sometimes on certain movements. And that honestly is showing you that there's a recruitment issue in that muscle of recruiting all those spindle cells. And then the other piece of that I wanted to say, because you're talking about the hormone piece and everything, is let's just back up real quick. The whole thing that we're talking about for recovery is what people need to understand is, I tell even Diego this, and he already knows this at 7. So it's funny. The other day I was like, hey, buddy, how do we build our body, when we're in the gym or after? And he goes, after that. So he already gets that concept. And I want to make sure he understands that at his age, because I didn't get that until my 30s, right? But what people need to understand is any type of exercise you do, doesn't matter what it is, the whole goal of that activity is you're creating a hormone cascade in your body. And this will differ between yoga or running or jogging, or I go do CrossFit, or I go and sculpt in the gym. I mean, everything you do is going to give a different type of hormone cascade. but it's everything that you do from the moment you leave that workout and that activity that is going to build on those hormones. So like what Nick is saying too, if you're doing too much, you get into this really bad area of just constantly putting too much stress on your nervous system, and your body cannot keep up.
Yeah.
And there's only so much hormones to go around. So if you're not using them to build your body and you're doing too much, what do you think you're utilizing those hormones for? To try to keep up, basically.
Yeah. And to that point, let's take that a step further. Let's say someone is a collegiate athlete. They have to show up at their practice, and with that in mind, I also want to make sure we talk about some biohacks, some other tools, like you like to use the compression boots and other things. Like I'd like to jump into some other, what are some other maybe passive recovery type tools that you could utilize. But let's talk about someone who's, has to stick to a program for, external circumstances, like I said, being part of a team and whatnot. So what can they do to maximize their recovery?
So the first thing I tell all my athletes is you're fighting inflammation. That's the first thing you have to focus on, is we're fighting inflammation. So really a big piece of that is just diet. Like, are you eating right? So we're back to eating. So, we talk about these all the time. So one of the big culprits for everybody is sugar. If you're consuming too much sugar, this is holding you back largely, because this is contributing to a large amount of inflammation. Outside of that, I would tell people toxic fats. We talk about this all the time. So if you're eating out too much, you're getting lots of toxic fats. And just based off of those two, man, I'm not going to throw gluten into there because some people do okay with gluten. Okay. But toxic fats and sugar would be the two main culprits, I would say, in your food that you got to be real careful with, that are already messing you up. But the other piece of this is, how well are you digesting the food that you're eating?
Yeah.
So I've seen huge things in athletes that have poor digestion and their ability to build their body well. This is that swole fat, right? Or they're looking inflamed and puffy all the time. That's because they have bad gut function. So if you're not assimilating those nutrients, right, you're not breaking them down well, you're not getting those for energy to fuel your body and to feed and build your body. So that's a big issue, is digestion. So something as simple as taking some enzymes to make sure you're digesting when you eat your meals. And the other thing I tell my athletes, this is good. So when you go work out, if you ate, let's say, an hour and a half, 2 hours before your workout, and then you go in the gym and start working out and you didn't digest that food well, you cannot pull and circulate blood into your muscles for that workout. So two things. Number one, you're not going to get the building you want. You're not going to get that tissue perfusion. So you're opening yourself up to injuries or causing an issue when you actually train. But listen up, everybody. When you eat, your body prioritizes digesting that food, and it will pull all of that blood into your gut to try to break that food down. So if you don't digest efficiently, when you hit that gym, you're still trying to break food down, and you cannot perfuse tissue. And that's another big thing. So for some of you who have digestive issues, enzymes are a great way to help you assimilate a little bit better, digest that food. So by the time you get in the gym, you're done digesting, and your body can focus on shunting that blood where it needs to go to help you build.
Yeah, man, you said so many important things there, and it's so understated. I just thinking back to my days, like, no one asked about digestion. It was normal to be gassy because of all the protein powder you're eating. Right? It was sort of a joke, but it wasn't really discussed in a way that, like, this is a massive priority. So on the topic of protein, this is where, let's talk about amino acids a little bit, and let's talk about some time restricted eating tools that athletes and dads and moms, other people that are doing some of their own sort of self-guided type exercise and being consistent. But let's talk about amino acids, and then let's talk about the sort of the sweet spot, I guess, of a meal window.
Well, you and me had a great discussion with Dr. David Mcguff, where we talk about not all proteins are created equal. And, that was another thing I wish I had known when I was younger, because, like you said, they were like shoving whey protein down us like 24/7. And let me tell you, everybody, when you're in a locker room full of 55 guys and they're all on a high protein diet of Go drinks, they were called Go drinks back then at UTEP. And we used to have this ongoing joke. We called the chocolate one chocolate thunder, because everyone would have horrible gas, right? But yeah, you don't, not all proteins are created equal. Go back. We have a podcast. It's called The Perfect Amino with Dr. David Mcguff. But me and Nick and Dr. Mcguff talk about, how Dr. Minkoff went on this search for the best proteins to utilize for athletes, just anybody in general, to get the most absorption. And it's amazing. You start to learn that, wow, we don't absorb some of these things very well. So we're not getting what we want out of them, things like whey protein and even some of our dietary proteins. But when you eat a good amino acid supplement, and they're not all created equal, everybody, you have to find a good company. The reason we're so big on a company called Body Health is because of the absorption that these give you. Okay, these are pretty amazing in the fact that you're getting a 99% absorption of these. You got the right ratios of aminos. And then it's amazing what happens when you actually get on a really good protein to your body on the efficiency of how you build, but it goes beyond muscle, right? So having that right type of protein is humongous because it's tissue turnover. You're building muscle. You're literally damaging and rebuilding and damaging and rebuilding. And if you're not putting the right stuff in, your body can't utilize it, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. You're
just kind of spinning your wheels. And what I've learned, at our age now, man, is like when you use the right tools, it's just so much easier. So much easier.
Well, I just think if we were still doing what we did in the past and expecting the same results, we would be sorely compromising our body and definitely a repair process.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I love the aminos. I mean, those are one of the supplements that I just take religiously. Whether or not I've had a harder workout day, it's part of life. It's part of the building blocks of the brain, the immune system, the enzymes in the body, obviously the cartilage, the hormones, everything. It's a part of the entire cascade of human physiology, and it's there to help you build muscle. So it's an important tool. So basically, we would suggest get rid of the protein powder, right? I mean, focus on true amino acids, the true building blocks, which help to build muscle, and the actin, myosin, the components of muscle contraction. Those are basically small peptides that are built from amino acids. So super, super important. What about fasting? Can you fast and still put muscle on? And what would be a strategy there for athletes?
So the answer is yes. So, there was some talks about this the last couple of years. They were trying to say you can't build muscle while fasting. That's actually incorrect. You can absolutely do it. I've done it many times. I have clients that have done it. Typically what I recommend to people when they're trying to still build muscle but they want to go on some kind of fasting schedule is we do something called flexing, basically. So what I do with them is they'll intermittent fast pretty much every day, but we carb load every other day. So kind of how I explain it is on the days that I train, I'll intermittent fast, I'll have my workout, I'll eat lunch and dinner that day, maybe a snack in between. And then the day that I'm not training the following day or I'm active recovery, I carb load that day. I may still intermittent fast, but I eat a ton of carbs. So I'll eat carbs at lunch, I'll eat carbs at dinner, big carb loading meals, sweet potatoes, white rice,
lentils, chickpeas, that kind of stuff.
Lentils, like you just add in as many carbs as you can, because kind of what you're doing on these flexes is you're just filling your glucose tank. Now your glucose tank is your muscles, everybody. So when you have extra storage to store all this energy, so when you carb load, all that extra glucose goes into the muscles. So then when you don't eat as many carbs the following day, you're emptying that tank, and then you do it again. So you're able to still maintain this intermittent fasting schedule, stay lean, but actually build muscle. So I put on like 15 pounds of muscle in 6 weeks, I think last time I told you. So roughly a month and a half to 2 months, but completely possible, right? But again, you're not starving yourself. You're just kind of flexing on these other days, but absolutely, fasting is great because for recovery, it's giving us that rest. We're not digesting food. The body can focus on repairing and rebuilding, right? And honestly, if you ask me, that's one of the better tools I have actually found for recovery, because I used to eat all the time. So before, when I weighed a lot, like it was always breakfast, lunch, dinner, right? Like nonstop. It was just constant eating. And that was one of the big things that actually helped me a lot, was just going to more of an intermittent fasting schedule, doing these carb flexes every other day, and I stayed lean. I recover well. I'm not hurting. It's crazy how better the recovery is now versus where it used to be. I'm not sore for like 3 days after a really heavy workout. Usually a day and a half, and my body's already making its way back.
Yeah. And just to reiterate one of the points you made earlier, you don't want to eat even a decent sized meal or a small meal before you work out. You really want to, ideally, if you can, work out in a fasted state. Now, if you are going to work out in the afternoon, try to delay that workout for at least maybe 3-4 hours from your last meal, if that's the only time you can do it. But ideally, you do go in a fasted state. If you feel like you absolutely need something, this is where amino acids can come in. You can take a couple scoops, get up to 10 grams of aminos if you're doing the body health ones before your workout, or you could do them after your workout. These are great tools to extend that experience, because as David said in the beginning, these various types of exercise are going to elicit different types of hormone responses. And what happens after you go through this, challenge, you're going to get this massive surge in growth hormone, among lots of other hormones like adrenaline and other things like that. But the idea is that as this growth hormone rises, you want it to linger in the body for as long as you can. So we usually tell people, go ahead and have the aminos, but try to delay your eating for a couple hours after that workout, so you can really ride that hormone wave of growth hormone.
And that's huge, dude. I mean, that's the second conventional wisdom myth of the gym is eat right away after you train. And you have people like with their banana and their apple
as fast as you can.
They've got their protein shake in their bag, and immediately after they're done working out, they're like slamming it, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing because what Nick's speaking to is huge. You shut off that hormone response. You just killed everything you did in the gym, because insulin competes with all these other things. So the moment you spike that insulin right after the gym, all that growth hormone and testosterone that you just focused on building, right away, you just literally crapped on it. No joke.
Yeah.
So that 2-hour window is huge. It really is. What do the research studies show on that? It's like 1,200% increase in testosterone when you hold out for 2 hours post gym.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's huge.
Huge. Okay, so let's talk about we talked about some of the time restricted eating and the fasting, different types of exercise you can do there, some ways to work in an alternate day carb loading depending on your workout schedule, delaying your eating afterwards, getting rid of the sugar, putting in the right fats, the right amino acids. These are all foundational things. Let's talk about some biohacks or some passive recovery tools that you can utilize to flush maybe the lactic acid, help to speed through DOMS, the delayed onset muscle soreness. What are some of the tools you've used, and what are some things that you would recommend to people?
So one of the easier ones I would start with is using molecular hydrogen, man. So just making sure you're staying hydrated. You can throw some tablets in your water, pre-workout, post-workout, just throughout the day. Hydrogen water in the morning and the evenings is good. It will actually enhance recovery. So that's a really easy thing you can add in. And then we both have a PEMF, right? So we have a Beamer, BEMER, microcirculation devices. So these are amazing. These improve microcirculation in our body by 32%, right? 32. And it's massive for recovery. That's the superhighways on which we carry everything. When we need to recover, we need good circulation. So those actually help a lot with the circulation. And then you have the red light therapy, right? So that's also great for recovery. If you have a Juve light, or there's some other companies out there, things like that. And then you also have hyperbaric. So you actually have more toys than I have to play with in this department. But those are some really good ones, man. Some of us have access to some of these things. Nick's got those at his longevity lab up there at Divine Elements, but those are great, man.
And the sauna.
And then infrared sauna. Yeah, that's the other one we both have. So like I have the Beamer, the sauna out here.
You got the foot bath too, don't you?
Yeah, we use the ionic foot baths. I don't use those as much for recovery. I do have the recovery pumps. So recovery pumps are great. So vasopneumatic compression is great. Number one for lactic acid and moving the lymph out of the body and just keeping it circulating. But I started with water, man. Like a lot of people aren't hydrated, so that I would really just say,
keep
like,
it simple, right?
Are you hydrated?
Yeah.
Like, just ask yourself there, like, do I drink enough water? Because a lot of my patients, like, I find we don't drink enough water.
Yeah.
And this slows everything down. This slows fluid flow down. Your lymphatics will not move. So that's why you're probably sore too long, because you don't have enough hydration in your body to be moving that stuff through. So just make sure you're kind of doing the right things first. And then these hacks, like Nick is saying, they build on the foundation of you doing everything right, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And on the topic of water, I mean, we refer people to listen to the episode with Robert Slovak, Water and Wellness, and he gets into the kind of water, because that's an important piece to the whole recovery process if you're doing it right. Because essentially, you know, to summarize, definitely check out the podcast. But to summarize, reverse osmosis is your best bet for the cleanest water, but you got to make sure you remineralize. So minerals, are part and parcel to hydration. And so, you know, you mentioned the fast tonic. There's a SIA is another tool that we've used on ourselves and patients for helping with that intracellular redox molecules within that really help to reset cellular integrity and cellular function, energy, and all that stuff. Yeah, exactly. Quinton, the minerals that
I love those, by the way, man.
They're amazing.
Yeah, they're awesome.
So all of those are powerful tools to really upgrade or enhance your water experience. You know, one of the things I talk about with patients a lot is just sort of a hierarchy to healing, and you know, and I sort of relate this to just basic lifestyle. So if we're talking about survival mechanism, you can't go more than a few minutes without breath. So how's your breath even? You know, are you breathing properly? You have a breathing practice. Breath work is part and parcel to increasing your activity, because you're engaging more of your diaphragm, and obviously you're getting things moving. So that's inherently built into your exercise. And you can also incorporate a breath practice that coincides with your recovery. You know, it can be breath of fire, pranayama, alternate nostril breathing, box breathing, lots of other tools there. David brought up the priority number 2, which is your hydration. You know, and then the question there is, are you doing it right? Are you hydrating properly? Are you adding the minerals, the hydrogen, whatever it may be? And then step 3 is when we eat, which we already referred to, which is more important initially, I think, than what we eat. But there's when you eat, and then how you move, and then ultimately your nutrition. So it's interesting, I think, in the world that we're in, we focus so much in on that nutrition, and we forget, you know, these stages of importance that precede, are you getting your food right? And the food is extremely important. But I always like to sort of lay out that hierarchy of, like, are you just an upper chest breather? Are you really engaging your full diaphragm because you're doing increased activity? And now can you incorporate a conscious breath practice into this whole thing? And then into the water and the fasting, everything.
Oh, that was huge, man. Isn't it amazing how we like overshoot some of the basics sometimes?
Totally.
And as you're saying that, I'm thinking, oh my God, that should have been the first thing that we talked about, right? Because honestly, man, looking back, I didn't breathe with a crap when I was younger. I didn't. I was never trained how to breathe properly. And I look back and realize that actually hindered my endurance. That hindered a lot of my performance, sports performance in my sports. You know what 2 things finally taught me how to breathe? Yoga and running.
Yeah.
Yoga is amazing with breath, because you can't fully open up into that body glove if you're not breathing right.
Yeah.
And anybody who's been like through a good yoga flow for about an hour, once you find your breath during that flow, it's like night and day difference how you start moving on that mat. But if you have trouble finding your breath, it can be a very long hour of yoga. And it's the same thing with running, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with running. I have some
true.
runs, man, I go on, my breathing is so good. I'm just flying and like feeling nothing. My endurance is amazing. And then I have other days I go on runs and I can't find my breath, and I struggle, man. I struggle the whole run. So breathing is huge, man. I'm so glad you brought that up, because you know, you could be taking all the best supplements in the world and doing all these other things, but if you don't have some of these foundations, like we're talking, like hydration and breathing right, man, forget it. You're already not doing some of these things right.
You know what's interesting is I remember when we talked a while ago about, you know, training for the Spartan race, and you said I hate running. So it's so interesting to see you, a couple of years later, after having, reincorporated into your life and recognizing this gift of breath and this new relationship that you have with it. Like that's pretty cool.
That was why the relationship sucked, because I didn't breathe right?
Totally.
I mean, and it's funny, man, now when it's time for me to do stuff like that, or running or go mountain biking, like I enjoy that stuff. Like, I really do, because it's really just about finding your breath when you go out and do those things. It's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's all it is.
And you've come a long way, just even your flexibility, right? So, there's a great book I'm reading right now. It's called Yoga Anatomy, and it's changing the dialogue of what breathing means into, are you breathing or are you just changing shape? Because essentially, like a breath on an inhale, you're expanding this lung capacity in 3 dimensions, which is forcing a change in space in your abdominal cavity, and then this contraction, is a change in volume of the lung, which allows for more of the space change again in the abdominal cavity. So it's this breathing is really more about flexibility of the spine, of the internal organ systems, of the inflammation in your body, the nervous system tone, the detox. And so your ability to change the shape of your internal cavities is a direct correlation of your ability to move through stress and challenge with ease, or with challenge, with more challenge than maybe necessary. So I think it was a really eye-opening dialogue to dive into that information in regards to like this change in shape.
Well, it's a good point, man. Like, how many patients do you think I see where they're like, oh, I always collect my stress in my traps? I'm like, no, you don't breathe right. And they look at me right away like, what? I'm like, yeah, you don't breathe right. There's no such thing. Like, you're not breathing right. And so I'm huge. I push everybody to learn Wim Hof, or it's a book called Warriors for Breathing. I mean, just go and start learning. It seems so simple, but me and Nick are spending time speaking about this because it will change your life. I have patients that have low back pain and some that have neck pain, and it's just because they don't breathe right. The moment they reestablish and they learn how to breathe, they literally get rid of their neck and low back pain, just because they started breathing properly.
Yeah.
So it makes massive changes. And if it's something that you think you need to get better at, why not? It's just like going to the gym. You can train your diaphragm. You can learn to get bigger breaths. Like Nick's saying, you can learn to start improving all these things. And it doesn't just change one thing. It changes a spectrum of things in your health. So it's huge.
Yeah.
And we only have so much time. Can we talk about supplements?
Well, we talked a little bit about amino acids and fatty acids. Maybe we should do a part 2.
Yeah, we can do that.
But what I was going to say is I want you to talk a little bit just before we close here on variation of your movement. So you taught me some cool stuff at a conference once, which I've incorporated. But maybe just talk a little bit about some of the different types of movements to re-engage the fascia, the ligament system, and through these maybe primal movement or whatever you would like to speak on.
So real quick story before I explain that, it won't take too long. So, I was, like we talked, I was an athlete. I probably lifted weights and trained playing baseball and football from the time I was maybe 16 all the way till I was like, like 25. Because I even played a lot of competitive flag football in grad school. Anyway, the thing, man, is I would train, but I'd always have kind of aches and pains on and off. And then I noticed, like, okay, wait a second here. Like, I want to be fit, but I don't want to hurt. And I shouldn't be hurting. And I got to a place in my mid-20s where I was like, man, like, I work out all the time. I love doing this, but, like, I'm hurting. Like, my joints hurt, my knees, my shoulders, my hips, on and off, my back. So I said, okay, there's got to be a better way to do this. So then I told myself at around 30, I wasn't going to lift weights anymore. I was going to dive into all these other disciplines of exercise that I had never messed with. So yoga and Pilates and primal movement and just all body weight based stuff, no weights. And it was amazing. One thing I learned was, holy crap, was I very inefficient at a lot of these other things. So you realize how many holes you're getting punched in where you thought you were from a fitness component. And then the other piece of that is I realized, like, I had very poor stability, mobility in my joints and spine. flexibility, all those things just weren't there. So from about 30 to 35, man, I did all those different disciplines and I rebuilt my body. And literally within 5 years, I didn't look the same anymore. Like I have the lean cut body that I always wanted. And it was really because, I mean, not just the exercise, I do things differently like we're talking, but I don't hurt anymore. I have the best flexibility I've had in my life. I have the best mobility of my spine. I have good integrity. I can move in all different motions and positions and I don't get restricted. I mean, I used to be very limited. I was very muscle bound. And this is why I was hurting all the time. So I always tell people, you know, any fitness regimen, you have to have a multidisciplinary approach and varying the types of disciplines that you're using towards your fitness, because you can't be in a place where you're just doing strength training all the time, or I just go to the gym and do CrossFit, or I just go to the gym and I do sculpting, or that's all I do, right? Because you're building a very unidimensional type of body, and you're going to have a lot of problems because that one discipline is not comprehensive for everything that you need to be fit. So I tell people you need to add at least 3 things that you do, 3 types of disciplines of exercise that are different to build a well-rounded body. So yeah, you can do your weight training, right, or your CrossFit, but then you also come over here and you do maybe yoga or Pilates. And then maybe you also do primal movement or like just body weight type movement exercise. And what you'll notice will happen over time is, one, if you're having certain pains and aches and things like this over time, a lot of these things dissipate. You'll notice your mobility gets better and your stability of your joints, right? These massive changes happen in the body just from adding these different disciplines. So if you're one of those people that you have very, you know, you're hurting, the gym's not fun anymore, I want to be fit, but I don't feel good anymore and I'm hurting, then it's time for you to change your process. If you want a different result, you can't keep doing the same thing thinking you're going to get a different result. You're just going to keep getting the same, right? So that was one of the biggest things that I saw in my life that has helped me tremendously. And I'm always telling my patients, like, you need to add more disciplines. And it's amazing. The ones that listen to me, it's life-changing for them, just like it was for me. But the ones that don't, man, they just continue to kind of go down that road of just having the same problems because they're not willing to just change some of these things.
Yeah. It's interesting, those conversations too, because, you know, I have them with patients all the time. You know, it could have started off with, hit the gym 5, 6, 7 days a week. I'm crushing this much protein powder, and people get, or creatures of habit. We're all like this, and we all have these, you know, very unidimensional, you know, aspects of how we see ourselves or how we want to see ourselves, and we don't realize that if we just open up that lens a little bit, you know, brought in a few more of these practices, brought in a little bit more diversification, which is one of our, you know, favorite terms for a lot of what we teach. It's sometimes a difficult conversation just to expand the mind. So part of this, you know, training the flexibility and the different movement strategies of the body. Are we also willing, you know, maybe as the last piece, to really be flexible in that mental space so that we can go, okay, it's time to learn something new. And it's, you know, often when we're faced with learning something new, we're like, oh shit, there's a whole lot to learn here. But can we have that sort of beginner's mind kind of look at ourselves on a more regular basis? Are we willing to, you know, investigate and, you know, look at those holes, those inconsistencies, the resistance within our body? Are we willing to actually address them so that we can open up to some of these new levels of understanding about ourselves, or new levels of healing even, you know, because often where that pain is, you know, there's a physical component, there's an emotional component, there's a mental block, there's, you know, maybe toxicity or inflammation, might be something else going on. So yeah, great conversation today, buddy, on all these different aspects. Where should we leave them? I mean, you did bring up some supplements. Is there some core stuff that you want to just
one thing we left out, I would say pure form. So a good omega, you know, fatty acids. That's something, you know, big. And then for muscle growth, colostrum is great. That's another one, a big one that a lot of people will use if you're trying to put on some muscle. And there's a lot of other things. We probably need to do another one of these, just talking about supplements. But, you know, one other thing we left out for recovery, CBD. CBD is great. Okay, so yeah, just a couple things there, but yeah, man, I think we gave him a lot of stuff today. There's a lot of good nuggets in this one. And for our listeners, I would say for your home play is pick at least one or two of these things that we talked about today. And if you're not already doing them, start making some changes like Nick is saying, right? So this could be like, oh, I'm going to try taking, I'm going to remove some of these things from my diet and see how I do. Or I'm going to take another day off and do active recovery. Or, I'm going to start working on my breath because I've noticed that's something I struggle at. So pick one or two of these things that we spoke about today that you know that you maybe need to work on. Or add another discipline. Maybe you need to add that new discipline to your regimen because there's something missing. But yeah, man, lots of good things today.
Yeah, loved it. It's funny because we said, before getting on, it's like, how did we not talk about this one yet? Is it's just such an important one, and so many of us that are, either intentional with being regular with their practice, or more just wanting to get in, or those of us who have been really steady and or are more the athletic type. That are maybe wanting some refinement in their journey or their experience. I think there's something for everybody with this one. So, thanks so much for your wisdom, buddy. I mean, both of us deeply care about this space and the physical well-being and the vehicle, and taking care of the vehicle for as long as possible. It's definitely important to us, and we feel this should be important to everybody. I think more so than any other time, we've recognized just the power of being a resilient human being, physically, emotionally, spiritually. If it wasn't important before, man, is it important now? And so, absolutely, one less thing to have to worry about if we can take proper care and attention to our recovery practice, right?
Huge.
All right, brother. So we got some fun guests coming up in the next few weeks for those of you tuning in, and we'll see all of you on the next one. Thanks for being a part of the show.
Yes, we love you all. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next one.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please be sure to subscribe to the Dr. Dads and share with your family and friends. You can also follow and interact with Dr. Nick and Dr. David on Facebook and Instagram for a daily dose of inspiration and the latest in health and wellness. Be well.